and a place to stand outside the earth, I promise you to move the earth. People laughed at him at that time. They thought he was a fool. But today we know by the principle of lever that Archimedes was absolutely correct. And that principle of lever, in our case, was the power of research and knowledge. The principle we decided to follow, our dictum in search is one accurate measurement is infinitely superior to 1,000 intelligent opinions. We Indians have a standard national pastime to have opinions on everything, generally, usually wrong. In search, the dictum is we don't want opinions. What we want is a fanatic focus on measurement. So we establish what we call a community laboratory of 86 villages, where villages are our lab, not necessarily AC-covered offices, and started measuring the infant mortality rate, which, as all of us know, is one of the most important 3 indicators of the prosperity and development of any society. And it was 121 in 1988, which essentially meant more than 1 in 10 children would die before even attaining the age of 1 year. The next principle we decided to follow, politically incorrect to be following something which the China said in today's situation, but if you want to follow something, this is it. How far a mother on foot can walk with a sick baby, healthcare must be made available within that distance. First People's Health Congress, China. And with that principle in mind, we decided to work with these 2 women. On the left side, the traditional birth attendant in a rural society for thousands of years, and on the right side, a community health worker, a semi-literate woman who is from the village itself, and decided to train them in taking care of children. For example, if a child is unable to breathe at the time of birth asphyxia, use a MU bag. Use injectable antibiotic if the child has neonatal sepsis. And at the end of 1 year of training, we invited top 10 pediatricians and neonatologists of the country. Some of the doctors attending this probably would recognize these 2 eminent people. The man in turban, Dr. Mehrban Singh, the Bhishma Pitamaha of neonatology, director of neonatology at AIIMS. The other person, Dr. Anish Shah from Mumbai, one of the most eminent pediatrician, president of the Asian Paediatric Congress, and 10 such eminent pediatricians and neonatologists, president of NNF and IP, took an exam of these semi-literate women from the community, assessing their ability to provide children and neonatal health care in the villages of Gadhchiroli. At the end of 3 days, by the way, the passing percentage was 70% for these community health workers and not 50%, which is for all of us medical doctors. And all the 10 were external, not 2 external, 2 internal, as again we usually have in our medical practical exam. At the end of the 3-day evaluation, Dr. Mehrban Singh, chairman of the evaluation committee, made this statement. These ordinary looking women, the trained community health workers in Gadhchiroli, know about newborn care more than the medical graduates of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. With this ringing endorsement, we decided to move ahead with implementing the program. This was the first batch of the TBA. This was their convocation ceremony in 1988, where they were trained in child health. And this was the first batch of our women community health workers. The community health workers started delivering care, visiting the newborn, measuring temperature, weighing the weight, measuring the respiratory rate to diagnosis of pneumonia and treatment. In case of neonatal sepsis, providing injectable antibiotic, group health education in the villages, measuring blood pressure of the mother for PIH, meticulously measuring, checking the danger signals, measuring the weight of the women for postpartum sepsis, secondary postpartum hemorrhage, checking puerperal fever of the mother, and of course, subsequently giving them the power of technology. At the end of the program, this was the impact. As we know, the infant mortality in 1988 was 121, and over last 30 years with consistent effort, today it has finally come down to about 21. So a reduction of 100 points over last 30 years in Gadhchiroli. This was taken up by the Government of India, replicated all across all states of India, has become national policy of India. The ASHA program, 800,000 ASHA in as many villages of India are providing these services. Last year, 1.1 crore newborns were served through the home-based mother newborn child care program. And subsequently, it ended becoming a global policy through a joint statement of WHO, UNICEF, Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, and USAID. And the Time magazine has declared Search, our organization, as one of the global heroes of health. And by the way, the title of Time magazine's article on Search was "The Listeners," the power of listening. To summarize, this is what we have realized: community plus local action plus science. When these three come together, you serve locally and you also create national and global impact. I began with Gandhi, let me end with Gandhi. 1947, Calcutta, partition was ongoing. As we all know, India was facing a bloody, almost civil war-like situation. But Calcutta, where Gandhiji was sitting on a fast, had brought peace to the entire Eastern India and Bengal. Mountbatten said, my 50,000 army is unable to keep peace in Punjab, and one-man army is keeping peace on the east. One young man went to Gandhi and asked him, when I am faced with a problem and challenge in life, how should I find my solution? And Gandhiji gave this, I shall give you a talisman. When faced with a dilemma as to what your next step should be, remember the most wretched and vulnerable human being you ever saw. The step you contemplate should help him. And this is our talisman. Thank you.
My God, I think we are left speechless with the treasure of the journey that you have shared with us, Anand. And I don't know, I think some things are life changing for a lot of people. And when we kind of hear such a huge legacy, it kind of really makes us wonder that, getting an inspiration or motivation from the Mahatma is one thing, but there has to be a calling within. So what do you think are the key ingredients for motivating self? One, what do you as a person think about it? And the team, it's not been easy to climb such a huge mountain. So how do you keep oneself motivated and the team? And I will then pass on the same question to Anish as well. So this is the first question that we're really beginning with. What are the key ingredients for motivating self and the team, and especially when you're working against odds?
So three responses, all three actually again quoting back to stories of Gandhiji. One, I guess the talisman. Talisman becomes your North Pole. And because in our case, fortunately, we end up seeing the talisman surrounding us every day, we never forget the talisman. The second is, how do you motivate others? Ram Manohar Lohia, the fireband socialist leader, once asked Gandhiji that, Bapu, we socialists, we other leaders give such fiery speeches. Our dictum is so powerful. Our voice modulation is amazing. And look at you, you speak so blandly. Nobody is able to really hear what you are saying. Why do the people of India really listen to you? Gandhiji said, Beta Ram, इस देश की जनता बहुत होशियार है. वो जानती है मैंने उन्हें जिंदगी में ऐसी कोई चीज करने के लिए नहीं कही जो पहले मैंने अपनी जिंदगी में ना की हो. My grandfather, he passed away in 2013. We asked him what was the magic of the old man. He uttered one sentence and you changed the course of your life. My grandfather said, if Gandhiji would have told me to go to the villages of India while he was sitting in Delhi in Viceroy Palace, I would have completely ignored him. He was sitting in sweltering heat of Vidarbha on mud-covered floor in a village and was asking me to go to village. So I guess the power of leader only and ultimately stems from living life of integrity and living the message that we want to really preach.
I think very, very good words of wisdom. And really, you brought out the fact that a good leader takes action from the front, leads from the front, and that's, I think, one of the most valuable lessons that we've learned all along and from your journey as well. Anish, I'm sure the corporate world is another different set of challenges and different set of a jungle, so to say so. So you've navigated it so well and so successfully. So what would you say are the key ingredients to keep yourself motivated and the team when the odds are against
Thanks, Rajita. In terms of keeping myself motivated, I've always felt that there has to be a purpose, a bigger purpose beyond self. And that often comes from the organization. So over time, I have been fortunate to be in some of the organizations around the world that have had a very strong purpose. At the Mahindra Group as well, our purpose really is to enable positive change or drive positive change in the lives of our communities to enable them to rise. And that purpose is what keeps me motivated in terms of doing something that's broader than self. In terms of the team, what I've always found is how do you give them recognition? How do you catch them doing something right? The general tendency is to find something that's wrong and say, you should do this differently. And I'm sure I do that lots of times. But what I try to do more often sometimes is to find someone doing something right and then saying, that's great, do this more often. And what I found is that that really makes a big difference, because over time I found that it's impossible to change anyone. And I've stopped trying. That applies to personal life as well. So it's better to find the best in folks and see what they can do more.
Yeah, I mean, Dhiren, do you want to add or ask something else, or should I go on with the next question? Because I think both of these,
yeah. See, you go ahead and then I will intervene in between.
they are going to really give us a huge amount of wealth of knowledge, I think, today. So then the second thing is that, we spoke about motivation and we said that, leader leads from the front, which obviously means that you have to have a lot of drive within you. And with that, with whatever you decide to do comes duty. So as a person, how do you differentiate? What is the difference between drive versus duty? And which do you think is the stronger force? How do both of these balance out in different situations? And if you could give anecdotes for the same. So who wants to go first on that one? Maybe let's get back to Anand again.
So and that's a great question. What we try to follow actually is a principle given by Vinoba, where he says that at the intersection of four factors lies the true calling or duty and both joy of an individual. These four factors are Swabhav, your own nature, personality. Second is Swadharma, which is duty. Third is Samaj Dharma, which is what the surrounding society is immediately asking for. And fourth is Yuga Dharma, which are some global forces. For example, climate change is a global force, and ultimately, possibly it is the largest and most important challenge all of us will be facing in our life. So he points out that at the intersection of all four, you get the joy of contributing, joy of developing self, and also purpose of life, a fulfilling life. So that is what we try to follow in search. For example, science is a force of Yuga Dharma. In today's India, if we try to say that Ganpati was plastic surgery, that is completely going against Yuga Dharma, pseudoscience. Similarly, communal strife going against the Yuga Dharma forces. Samaj Dharma we see around in India, whether it is the inequality or the left-wing extremism or the alienated tribal that we see constantly around, is our Samaj Dharma. Swadharma, as a doctor, I must provide medical care. And Swabhav, what is my fundamental nature? Do I like to serve clinically per patient? Do I like to do research? Do I want to emphasize on policy? At the intersection of these four, we in search try to find our calling.
I would say that Anand has answered that so beautifully. I may not add much here, but what I will just say is, I think they have to go together. I think drive is like the heart, duty is like the mind. And they have to work together in many ways. Let me share an example from the Mahindra Group again. In 1945, our founders put an ad in Times of India. That ad talked about the principles underlying which the company was being built. And those principles talked about diversity, talked about dignity of the individual, talked about dignity of labor. And when you read that, you would look at that and say, is this a social organization or is this an enterprise for profit? And that's the same dilemma in a sense that we take forward over the years. As I presented my strategic narrative or key directions to the board, they were essentially three things. Live our purpose. Our purpose is to enable others to rise. Delight our customers and reward our investors. And there was a discussion on how can we live our purpose and reward our investors at the same time. But that is what organizations of today have to do. So I wouldn't distinguish between drive and duty. I think both are essential.
I think equally beautifully elucidated, Anish. I think I'm just enjoying this too much. But yeah, I think it's good to see now, at the end of such a long journey, a success, or you have a story to tell. You have good things to show the world and inspire them. But I'm sure both of you all have faced difficult situations, either with an employee or with a co-worker, or with administration somewhere where you need to get past a really tough situation. So how do you get around it? How do you motivate it? And if you could share an example, how do you tackle it essentially?
I can go first to give Anand.
Please. No, please, Anish, please.
So I would say we had a difficult situation in one of the businesses I was in the past, where we realized that there were a number of areas that we hadn't met with the regulator's guidelines. And the regulator hadn't found them. They had done various audits over the years, but they had not been found. And these were a number of different violations that went back almost 12 years. So we were in a dilemma again. What should we do about this? No one's seen this. Can we keep it under the carpet? Because someone had swept it under the carpet in the past. And I think what we felt was it's better to be transparent. It's better to come clean and say, here are the issues. So with a colleague of mine, I went to the regulator and said, we found a number of things over the last 12 years that we have not been compliant on. And here's a list of things. Yes, there have been audits done, but they have not been found in the past. Here's a plan to fix them. They're not going to be fixed overnight. Some of them will take as long as 2 years. But I will come back to you every 3 months and give you an update on what we're doing. And I could see some sense of shock on the regulator's face saying, why are you telling me this? Right? I haven't heard this before. And we got very lucky. The regulator said, thank you very much. We won't put any penalties on you. They were obviously entitled to do that. The fact that you've come and told us is a huge plus. And that helped build such a strong relationship with them that helped us through many other things later. So I've always found that being transparent, being upfront is always the best course. Doesn't matter how difficult the situation is.
In our case, in Gadhchiroli, when we started our work, one day a young girl, about 14 years old, she came to the OPD. And she had anemia, she had splenomegaly. So immediately her blood was tested and the RBC were sickle-shaped. You can imagine the excitement of finding a case of sickle cell anemia in 1987 in Gadhchiroli for the first time in central India. So we went on a full research scientific trip, did a district sample survey, found out significant burden of sickle cell anemia in the tribal of Gadhchiroli. And then the findings were published. The health minister of Maharashtra came down from Bombay to Gadhchiroli, patted the back of search, publicly announced, oh, this is wonderful, look at this NGO, they do some such good work. And now the government of Maharashtra will set up a center for tribal health. We were, of course, extremely happy, such a glorious sort of recognition and victory. 15 days after the minister's visit, the news came out. Indeed, the government of Maharashtra did set up a center for tribal health in Pune. So tribal in Gadhchiroli, sickle cell in Gadhchiroli, health problem in Gadhchiroli, but the center was set up in Pune because, of course, nobody would like to come to Gadhchiroli to study the issue of tribal health and sickle cell. We were enraged. We went back to the tribal leaders saying that what is this? Government has done huge injustice to you. We must fight against this. The tribal leaders flatly refused. They said, Doctor, you came like a guest to our home asking for a drop of blood. Now, who says no to a guest asking a blood drop? So we gave you a drop of blood. Beyond that, have we ever complained to you about sickle cell? Have we ever shared with you that this was our priority? Never. So now the disease is yours, that center is yours, the problem is yours. Please don't come and harass us about this issue at all. Flatly refuse. And that was a great message. And that's when I said that we must focus on problems in our immediate community and not the scientific community we report to. Scientific publication, the virtual community, the PubMed community, the citation community, that driving my agenda essentially alienates me from my immediate beneficiary. And hence, the lesson we hard learned, which was the message that we need to constantly really listen by heart and mind to avoid such difficult situation with the possible beneficiary.
That's really something. I think Dhiren has been wanting to ask both of you all a question, so let's go on next.
Yeah. So I will ask a question on a slightly different ground. And basically, it's said that for motivation, the compensation or the money is a very important thing. Like someone said to me, one of my close friends, he said that Dhiren, you are at 58 and you may not crave for money. But any young doctor or any young person who is starting his career will definitely in a serious need of money. So now I am asking you a question which is very different from you from a different perspective. So the first question I would like to ask Anand, like when it comes to you, you are working in a tribal area, you cannot afford to give a salary to a doctor or your healthcare worker, the salary which they can receive in a major city like Mumbai or Pune. So how do you able to motivate your team with a less salary? Yeah, Anand.
Yeah. We will just not be getting doctors, or we don't get staff here, understandably, even if salary is significantly increased, because people don't necessarily come to Gadhchiroli with high salary. The government of Maharashtra offers 3 lakh per month salary to consultant and specialist. Despite that, they don't really get doctors. So I guess the target group that we have to approach has to be completely different. And that is one way we try to strive. Second, providing them with challenge and the direct joy of, on one side, service, on the other side, their professional growth, on the third side, the credibility and social recognition that comes with it. Number 4, we have felt that those who are to some extent spiritually inclined, they try to choose a place like Gadhchiroli. So I would say salary in a place like Gadhchiroli, even if we give significantly high salary to some extent comparable with the urban area, doesn't really get us the doctors. So these are the other factors that we try to work on.
Okay, let me just ask one counter question to this. You said very important point that in your setup, particularly in a remote place where there is not adequate facility, people are not very keen to come, even if you give them a good salary. And you're really looking for a desire to contribute. So how do you find out that in your people coming to you? So how do you find out that quality? Yeah, please.
Yeah, one is a method of how do we try to get human resource for Gadhchiroli. We are trying to run a youth social change maker program called Nirman. The idea is that there is a significant set of youngsters who are trying to find purpose in their life. which goes beyond the financial remuneration. So systematically targeting them, providing them with various examples of social challenges and methods to solve those problems. The methods could be multiple. Methods could be service, science, action, education, political action, media, law, civil engineering, etc. So a systematic method of targeting youngsters is what one thing helps. Second, frankly, providing them directly with a challenge to work on. And that again traces back to the Nai Talim or Bunyadi Talim education system set up by Mahatma Gandhi. My father was fortunate to study in that school. It was in Sevagram Ashram. It was set up jointly by Gandhiji and Gurudev Tagore. And my grandmother was the principal of that school. Now, that school essentially meant that we have, unfortunately, in our today's education, a weird dichotomy. First, we get education and then we live life. As if life and education are two distinct things, they don't necessarily go hand in hand. Nai Talim completely eliminates that dichotomy. It says life is education. There is no dichotomy, contradiction between the two. So providing them directly with a challenge is what we have felt both tests them in the best possible way and also identifies the steel within them to serve in a place like Gadhchiroli.
Yeah, but how do you find out that? Like, do you have some special taste or it's interview or something? How do you actually find out that?
Okay. The one method of what we have realized is that instead of a different interview or method, which frankly many people can cheat, put them directly in a situation. For example, Gadhchiroli has several primary healthcare centers in the remotest area. So we appeal to the medical doctors in Maharashtra who anyway want to serve their bond period, the 1 year post MBBS bond mandatorily, that come and serve in the PSCs of Gadhchiroli. Those who choose Gadhchiroli make that choice and show their steel. So I would say directly asking them to take up a situation is the true method that we follow. Rest all can be ultimately superficial.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Anish, now the question is to you, and I know that you are in a setup where you can definitely give money. So I just would like to understand, like, how do you use this philosophy or this tool to motivate people?
So I would
tool
say,
of money, the compensation.
Two things on this. I'd say the key aspect is what is the purpose, again, that the person wants to do. Money is never really a motivator. It's a hygiene factor in some form. What will really cause the drive is what they feel passionate about. And that passion comes from wanting to make a change or wanting to do better for themselves. For a number of folks that I've seen, it's often also about wanting to do better themselves over time, having a better career, having the opportunities to do that, having people take bet on them to say that I will give you something bigger to do. I will put you in a tougher situation, which you may not be ready for today, but you will learn from that. So those are the real drivers. Where I've seen money become an issue is where someone feels that it's unfair. So fairness and consistency is a very important part in an organization. And that transparency to say that we're going to be fair with everyone. When you feel unfair at that point, you feel that I'm in the wrong place. Someone's being unfair to me. That's when money becomes a more important factor. I think the bigger aspect is to be fair, be consistent, and therefore focus more on the drive and the passion rather than the money aspect.
Okay. Just one question. Like, I have interacted with a lot of young doctors and young people, and I have seen that many of them, they don't accept your philosophy about the purpose. They said that our main purpose is to earn money, to have a good bank balance or a reserve for the future life. So, like, what you said is absolutely right theoretically, but if you look at the practical life, the people don't agree to this philosophy. So what is your take on that?
You're absolutely right. And that's where it's a question of who do you attract and why do you attract them? Over the years, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I will often tell them that, look, if your goal is compensation in the short run, then this is not the place for you. If you want to build something, then this is a place for you. So you have to decide what you want to do. And yes, that is a fair goal. And a lot of people will have that goal as well. It's not as if something is wrong or right in that sense. It may change based on situation in life as well. You may have that goal for a few years, and then you may decide that I want to build something that's broader than that. So it's about attracting the right set of people at that point in time. And there are times when people in the organization will say, look, that's my goal right now in the short run. I want to go out and do something. And they will go out and do something else. And in some cases, they've come back after that saying, look, I've done that. Now I want to come back and I like this culture. So it's about having the culture. We can't be everything to everyone. So if you have the culture that you want, you got to attract the people that fit within that culture.
Okay, thank you. So we will come to the point which you mentioned about.
But just a small interjection there is that J. Krishnamurti beautifully said that if a soldier is marching to a different tune, it is not that he is discongruous with the military tune, he is listening to a different tune. So ultimately, the decision about life is not necessarily done. Again, Ekla Chalo Re, and in fact, again, Vinoma beautifully said, if you want the world, what you want to make the world to follow you, don't actually keep looking at the world, turn your back at the world is behind you. So leaders ultimately have to make their choice based on our conviction and completely disregarding who follows or not. The conviction that essentially what is true and right, people will follow. And that time invariably comes, even if sometimes late.
Okay, so over to you, Rujuta, for further questions.
I think Anand had very rightly said that it's important to be a good listener. And while I was listening to both of these answers given by us, I think what came across to me very, very clearly is that a good leader, especially if you're in a diverse setup and dealing with multiple levels, has to be a good communicator. So from both of y'all, I needed tips on how do you communicate to different strata. I mean, your same thing that you are delivering as either a healthcare change or as a company product. The beneficiary is very different in Anand's case versus the beneficiary in Anish's case is a completely different, setup. So how do you communicate at that level? And how do you communicate to your team to be able to finally deliver the vision that you start with? Leader always has a vision, but whether that will be carried forward correctly, that is important. So how do you really manage that? And if possible with examples or otherwise with generalization?
I will just continue with the same sickle cell story. And what happened was the next step in that saga. So of course, our tribal leaders flatly refused to take us seriously, but we wanted to do something because now that was an issue. And as all the doctors would know, there is hardly any cure, low-cost cure for sickle cell. So what do? The best way is to have premarital counseling, and two people who both of them have sickle gene, recessive gene, should not marry each other. Now, how do we promote premarital counseling and testing of blood for sickle gene in a remote place like Gadhchiroli, in the tribal of Gadhchiroli? There, I guess, again, knowing people's culture, anthropology intimately helped. As Hindu have Gotra, Goan tribal have Dev. Ek Dev, Don Dev, Teen Dev, Char Dev, Pach Dev, Saha Dev, Sat Dev. And as in Hindu culture, it is said that Samagotri Vivaha should not happen. Similarly, in the tribal culture, one Dev will not marry, boy will not marry a girl of one Dev. In tribal culture, they choose their own partners. And every prospective boy and girl in a tribal village who come together in the community center of Gotul know each other's Dev to decide whom should I possibly do my courtship. So when they know their Dev, we said that, as again the doctors would know, sickle cell gene provides partial protection against malaria, an ancient linkage going to the African. So we said, ask the tribal leaders, who is one of your biggest enemy? They said malaria. Then we informed them that If you have sickle-like blood cells in your blood, moon-like blood cells in your blood, it provides you protection against malaria. So this is a new Dev, Chandradev created by your supreme god, Pariku Parlingo. Now, if a boy has Chandradev in his blood, should he marry a girl of Chandradev in her blood? No, 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 absolutely not. That will be brother and sister marrying each other. Same Deva Vivaha should not happen. But then how do we avoid this? Well, we have to get our blood tested. And that's how the process of premarital counseling and getting blood testing started in the tribal of Gadhchiroli. So what our realization was to communicate, convince, and translate our method and effort. What we need to know intimately is to understand their culture, belief, and anthropology.
That is a remarkable story. And I'm very glad that in the corporate world, we don't face such problems like that. But how you handled that was fantastic.
Thank you.
I would say, Rajita, to your question, it's always communicate from the heart. Right? The term is authenticity across all strata. And I'll give an example. When I came into India as head of GE Capital here, we had 12 businesses in India. And the mandate was that 6 of them had to be shut down or sold, and the other 6 had to be grown. And one of the 6 was the mortgage business in India. And just a few months before I had come in, there was a headline in the Economic Times saying GE Capital selling its mortgage business. And obviously, everyone was looking at the new leader coming in saying, are you going to sell this business or shut it down? And what happens to us if you do that? And the principle that I've always felt is, again, to be authentic. And so the response to them in a large group was that, yes, this business is for sale. Here are the reasons why it is for sale. Here is how we're going to do this process. It's not going to be a fire sale. Employees are important to us. So we are going to make sure that we sell it to a place where they value you as an employee as well. And here's what we're going to do. And in the meantime, let's continue to build a strong business. And it was a very transparent and open conversation. We finally decided at that point not to sell it and wait for some time. And we communicated to them saying we're not selling it right now, but we will look for a potential sale process 2 or 3 years from now. We sold it 3 years later. We had a 5% attrition rate in that time period. And we sold it in a way where all the employees were taken care of. And that was one of the conditions of the sale, which is a new buyer will take all the employees. And the reason they stayed was because they felt that they were getting answers that were accurate. They may not necessarily like the answers, but they knew that they were being treated in a manner that we were fair with them, that they were important to us, and that we were telling them what was the reality without giving them any stories that they would likely have seen through. So I think communication, always just being authentic from the heart is in my mind the best way.
I mean, to take this further, I think this is one of the pressure situations probably you would have faced. And similarly, there might have been some with Anand. So what do you really tell yourself when facing a pressure situation? Do you form a backup plan? Do you form a plan B? And how do you take the leap of faith when something like this happens? Because finally, even when you handle a pressure situation, some point you have to move from thinking to deciding and then getting into action. So both of you, I mean, if we could go from Anish and then to Anand, how do you handle pressure, especially when the stakes are high?
So what I've learned over time is being outside your comfort zone helps you and makes you stronger for the next role. I've had many difficult roles in the past, and I've often looked at that and said, if I didn't have those roles in the past, I'd never be ready for the role I'm in today. So the counsel I'd often give a lot of people is, you may find it very difficult to be in a difficult role sometimes, but that's actually good for you. And they look back at me very strangely as if you don't know what you're talking about. So I think pressure is something that you just learn to cope with over time. And you have to be able to detach yourself from the situation. Again, easily said than done, but that only happens with experience. That only happens once you've gone through that. There was a time when I would get counseled by a couple of folks saying, don't keep looking over your shoulder, because it was a pressure situation many years ago. And I keep sort of looking over and saying, is this the right thing? Is it not the right thing? You can go back to what Anand said in terms of saying, if you're leading, lead. Don't worry about what's happening around you. Make the right calls. And I went through that situation, learned from that. Went through the situation with GE Capital where we actually did shut down 6 businesses. And there was a lot of pressure in terms of having that responsibility for the employees and making sure that they found the right thing. Because as a leader, you are responsible for them. And that makes it easier in the role today, where generally people reach out to me in a situation of a crisis. So there are multiple crises going on across the group at any point in time, whether it's small, medium, whatever it is, and that's what you get involved in. But that, again, it comes back to detach yourself. And the other thing I would say is take counsel from various people around. Everyone on the team has a point of view. And very often an organization will look at hierarchy and say, as a leader, you have to make the call and you have to do it. Yes, you do as a leader, you have to take responsibility. But that doesn't mean as a leader, you don't listen to other people. You have to listen to other people. And what that doesn't mean also is that you listen only to your team and not to someone very junior. Because sometimes someone very junior may have a very good idea in a crisis as well. So how do you create that line of communication? How do you create an organization that's open to listening and where people are open to sharing their views? Because very often people will say what you want to hear, or people will say what they think you want to hear, which is even more dangerous. So how do you create that organization where people are open to say what they want, which in many cases I've seen helps you get through a crisis much better.
Anand, what would you want to say on this?
For us, the leap of faith part and the leap of faith, we again derive from one beautiful story of Gandhiji. I think I'm going to bore the audience ad nauseam with stories of Gandhiji.
No, we are enthralled totally.
year 1931, and Gandhiji has announced salt satyagraha. Motilal ji reads about it, completely enraged, and he writes a 26-page letter to Gandhiji. Now, Motilal ji, a super eminent barrister, he makes a very elaborate case that how this salt satyagraha is one of the most idiotic thing that one can do to possibly try to gain the freedom of India. 26-page letter. Gandhiji reads it and it responds. प्रिय मोतीलाल जी, आपका खत मिला, करके देखो आपका बापू. Motilal ji read the letter and basically, sir pakad liya. What to do now? But we have accepted the leadership of this man. So Motilal ji announces that on this and this day, I will catch a train from Allahabad to Calcutta to do salt satyagraha. And on the decided day, he reaches the station. And while he's wanting to board the train, British police would come and arrest him. Motilal ji says, of course, arrest me, but let me send one telegram, which he sends to Gandhiji. प्रिय बापू, आपने कहा करके देखो, मैंने तो करने के पहले ही देख लिया. So I guess the leap of faith essentially comes from that belief. Again, the constant life of Gandhiji, which has helped us in many of such efforts. The year 2001, we live in a block called Dhanora of Gadhchiroli district. This block is one of the most left-wing extremism affected blocks, and of course a tribal block. One day, one woman came to my mother. She was crying, sobbing. She said, my daughter has been taken away from me. My mother was perplexed. She said, what happened? She said that my daughter has been sacrificed as a human sacrifice. Year 2001. So we were completely taken aback. And this was year 2001, this millennium, and in Gadhchiroli, in a supposedly developed state of Maharashtra, a woman comes and tells that human sacrifice of children is happening for various things. My mother started talking to various women, and one after another, the women started coming forward automatically. Initially one, then second, then third, and then fourth, that our daughter, our son has been taken away from us. And then they found out the fellow who was doing human sacrifice, almost like a Ramsay brother horror story. And then these women led by my mother, took a stand against the human sacrifice of children. There was a storm. The men opposed it. The men said that this is our tradition. How can you oppose it? But the women stood fast. And my mother received tremendous support. And finally, in year 2002, the human sacrifice in Gadhchiroli in Maharashtra stopped. So that was a great example that once you take a stand, people come with you, take that leap of faith, and we will ultimately achieve the result. So tracing to Karke Dekho, to our own direct example, with a very gory tradition, literally just 20 years back in Gadhchiroli.
Wow, I think super amazing. And from from both the anecdotes that you all have given, I think it's very important to be consistent in whatever you're doing and show your commitment. I think once you take a stand, then going back sometimes is perceived as a sign of weakness. Whereas in this case, I think remaining on the stand has really, despite all odds, has really worked in bringing about the change. So Dhiren bhai, I think there were some more questions which you have perhaps charted out. So if you could take them, and meanwhile I'll check what's coming on WhatsApp.
This question is to Anand, but this is in relation with what Anish said. He said that the career growth is very important. And I fully agree with you that for motivating people or to keep a good talent with you, you really need to convince them that you are going to have a good career growth in this place. Now, in Gadhchiroli, how do you practice this principle? Because probably there is not much opportunity for the career growth. So how do you apply this principle at Gadhchiroli?
Actually, I flatly deny that there is no opportunity for career growth. There's a beautiful first Harvard Business Review article and then the book, The Blue Ocean Strategy. We have a red ocean where there are too many sharks all competing with each other. I would say that red ocean is Bombay and Gadhchiroli is the blue ocean, no competition. So tremendous scope for growth and only growth, sky high growth. Number one. Number two is that there are of course systematic efforts to tell about the method part of it. For example, if a medical officer or doctor wants to specialize on cancer treatment, he or she will be fully supported to do whether it is workshops or training or partnership with even places like Tata Memorial Hospital. As shared, one of our medical officers was trained with Dr. Shekhar Bhojraj, and Dr. Bhojraj feels that he actually identifies the red flags in the cases of spine better than some of the orthopedicians or the community health workers who were trained in their own growth. One of these community health workers, when the program was scaled up across India, in Bihar, our team had gone to interact with the women in Bihar, the community health workers there, and asked them, what do you find as the difference in your life after you started serving as community health workers in your villages? Now, as we know, sometimes in North India, many times in fact, the woman is referred to in relationship with a man. Ramu ki bitiya, Ramu ki gharwali. The women, the community health workers told us that after we started serving our community, we were called by our name. Shantabai, Geetabai, Ramabai. We received an identity. Now imagine a woman, a semi-literate woman who is not even called by her name, now receiving her identity. And then it went one step forward. This community health workers told us not only now we are being called by our name, the men in our house are now being referred to as in our relationship. Ramabai ke gharwale, Shantabai ke bete, ya Geetabai ke pitaji. So the identity that people get at different level, the purpose and also the method, the specific method that we do, and in addition to that, the blue ocean that the Gadhchiroli is, I personally find provides incredible opportunity for growth.
Yeah, thank you. And you really said that working at Gadhchiroli definitely gives a good recognition in the society. And yes, recognition is one of the very important factor which helps people for motivating to do something.
Just a small again story there. General Eisenhower, as we know, the supreme commander of the Allied armies in World War II, and subsequently became one of the most revered president of the US by the Republicans especially. When he was the army commander, someone asked him, how do you motivate the armies, the huge Allied armies? He said, armies are like thread. If you try to push the thread will get all coiled. You have to pull the thread gradually. So for us also in Gadhchiroli, pushing doesn't necessarily help. The pull, by whether it is career growth or recognition or purpose, are the pulls that we try to work in Gadhchiroli.
I think you are using a lot of human psychology to motivate your people. So, and that we can see from your stories. So thank you very much. Over to you, Rujuta.
A question which has just come in on WhatsApp, particularly addressed to Anand. You've had a legacy where you've been working in a rural area. You've trained at the best of centers. You've been a scholar internationally. And now you're back to making a change here. So what do you think is one of the most effective ways to bring about a paradigm change? Adaptability, choosing your solutions catered specifically to your scenario, or having a step-by-step game plan?
So I would say, of course, all three, but something more than that. Again, since ancient Indian philosophy, we all face the question, hopefully at some point in life, koham, who am I? So existential question. In 60s and 70s, when the youth revolution was at its peak across the globe, the Parisian youth gave or asked a different question. They said, whose am I? Because who am I can sometimes become a selfish question. Whose am I provides the umbilical cord and purpose. I would say that essentially is the ultimate answer to identifying the right solution. Because when you know whose am I, you see that individual, that talisman, that relationship of heart, then mind definitely follows it. So I think for me, apart from everything else, the whose am I is actually the one which provides me with the best of the solution.
There's another question also for you. You're in a prime role now in advisorship to the governments. So where do you see, especially there's a lot of talk of healthcare sector being changed now, and there are reforms already on the anvil and some more to obviously come. Where do you see the healthcare sector, say 5 years from now in India?
Now, the answer can be sometimes politically incorrect also. So please mind me if I say so. I guess.
Okay, so we want your vision as the leader. Let's not get politics in it.
Right. I would say two ways. One is, fortunately or unfortunately, COVID has. Sometimes I feel we doctors, all of us, medical professional, public health professional, we can be extremely nice people, in the sense that we don't really demand from rooftop the necessary investment. Number two, unfortunately, in general, social sectors in the government are second-rate sectors. The best of the officers you don't necessarily see in the social departments. Health, women and child development, medical education, social justice, tribal development. Best of the officers go for infrastructure, PWD, home department, etc., etc., etc. Health has been brought at the center stage finally because of COVID. So the financial investment have started happening. I would say that's a great development. The important part going forward is, partly it relates to our mission, is that secondary and tertiary healthcare, though crucial, cannot really solve the problems of the size of country of India. If we look at US own GDP in healthcare, the way that has skyrocketed, and possibly with the same linear projection rate, 80% of the US GDP would end up getting spent on only healthcare. So in our case, the community-based care, decentralization of primary care, and there we doctors have a fundamental responsibility. We cannot take a stand where we say that healthcare, medical care only and must be provided only by doctors. If we take up that stand, if we take up that position, we will be dinosaurs. because it is impossible to do so. So healthcare, the democratization and decentralization of at least primary and select secondary healthcare to a vast array of whether community health workers or other paramedic professionals is the need of the hour. And instead of lagging and being pulled by the forces of the society, it is best that we doctors lead the path. I would say that would be my vision.
I think that has been very aptly put in the current scenario. And two questions for Anish as well. With the sheer diversity that you are handling across right now, the company that you're heading, what is a typical day like for you, or thought process in terms of what will you prioritize and where do you see maximum thrust personally as a leader, in which sector? I mean, I'm not really saying you have to reveal any strategies to us, but just as a leader.
So that's a great question. There is a part of the day that is focused on what's immediate. It may be some great things someday, it may be fighting fires the other day. But as a leader, what I found, it's important to really be able to plan and spend time on things that are important for the long run. So what we've done is we've got a set of 24 what we call breakthrough projects. These are projects that will have a significant impact. These projects are divided in the same three categories. First is around living our purpose. Second is around delighting our customers. And third is around rewarding our investors. On living our purpose, one of the key areas of focus is on climate change. And we're taking leadership across the world on climate change. We are setting standards for a number of other companies to follow as well. We've declared carbon neutrality by 2040, with a number of other standards going up till there, which is zero waste to landfill, water positive. There is an organization called EP100 around energy productivity, around RE100. So there are targets for that. And we're basically playing a thought leadership role with various different forums around the world, including the UN, the World Economic Forum, to be able to look at what can we do different for climate change. The second key focus is impact on women empowerment. This is with regard to education of the girl child, which is Nanikali. Today, we educate about 500,000 girls every year. We're looking at how can we get that up to 1 million in the next 2 or 3 years. And then how can we get 1 million jobs for women also in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's a second big initiative. The third is around what we call Project Haryali, which is planting trees. Today, we plant about 1 to 2 million trees a year. We've done about 20 million already in the past few years, and we're trying to get to 5 million trees a year now. And that often is done in areas that benefit the communities around. An example is we have a tribal region in Araku, and they've actually been able to benefit from trees, create a certain arable land, develop coffee. And the coffee there is so good that they've actually opened a boutique coffee shop in Paris, which has been quite the highlight in terms of Araku coffee being taken globally. So these are some of the initiatives with regard to living a purpose. I won't go through details on the others, but to just answer the question on which businesses hold the greatest potential, I can't give a short answer to that in 1 or 2 businesses, but I can give a short answer to that in terms of focus areas. So 4 key core businesses: auto, farm, Tech Mahindra, and Mahindra Finance. There are 10 growth gems which have an opportunity to reach $1 billion of market cap in the next 3 to 5 years, which include some of our listed entities, holidays, real estate, logistics, then unlisted entities, solar, and a few others, and then what we call a new age platforms. So it is, in a sense, a fairly vast set of businesses, but that's really the exciting part of this role.
Wow, I think you're probably going to bring about a paradigm shift. And the second question was actually related to that only, that when you talk about doing a paradigm shift, how important do you think is, or, bringing about one, sometimes probably it just happens by way of what you're doing. How important is adaptability? And in becoming very adaptable, do you lose focus of the ultimate vision? I mean, you kind of sometimes feel that you started with something and you've ended up something else totally?
I think a clear focus is very important, because what we often get caught up is in the here and now. And it's easy to respond to things every day. That takes up all our time. But it's more important to step back and say, here's the focus we have. Let's take the distractions away and spend time on things that are really important. One has to be adaptable in the sense saying if something is not working or we find something better, yes, that's something that we've got to adjust, and we've got to be open to listening to others for that. But that should not happen every day. That should happen only when it's thought through. And sometimes even creating the focus, this list of 24 projects was co-created with our board, with our senior leaders, and with larger teams as well over a period of 4 to 5 months. And that co-creation is what helps. Then you have a focus and you go right after it.
That would surely help. I think we've been having a wonderful interaction with both of you all, and I'm sure.
And just a small interjection.
Sure.
The morning coffee that one of my indulgences in life is the Araku Valley coffee. And the tribal leaders from Gadhchiroli are planning to go and see the work of Manoj and Nandi Foundation, hopefully next month.
That is
building a bridge between the two. Yeah.
So we have now got coffee that goes from Gadhchiroli to Paris.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So, but I mean, I think I need to step back a bit and have Dhiren Bhai ask some of his questions, because he's been quiet for too long now. You're mute, Dhiren Bhai.
Sorry for that. So basically now coming towards more of motivating the team, we talked first about the compensation, the first C. The second is about the career growth. Now coming to the third C, that is taking care of your team. So Anand, I would like to start with you because you have a wonderful anecdotes, and I want to listen from you about how you have taken care of your team. Some powerful anecdotes like which really make us understand the value of carrying the team members.
I guess my anecdotes are putting me on a pedestal of continuing to share the powerful. Well, I guess essentially the culture that we have created. My background is the gate of our campus. It is called Shodha Gram, Research and Gram. And idea is to create an ambience where we try to mix cultures of ashram, a tribal village, at the same time modern amenities. So having a large joint family, 150 people live here who are from different parts of India. Community prayer and community shramayog. We don't call it shramadan. Dan has a feeling that you are giving something to somebody. We say shrama and bread labor is essentially helping yourself. Are two of the most important activities which essentially keep the bonding. In addition to that, of course, celebrating every single festival to ensure the cultural bonding. And number three, any time of crisis, be there with everyone. So I guess the large family spirit of 150 people living together in a place like Gadhchiroli, where the lubricants are common activities, including some spiritual quest, is what really keeps motivated here and cared for.
Yeah, Anand, but we really look for some great story for that.
Well, I will pass the question to Anish and hopefully try to recollect some story in the meanwhile.
Yes, Anish, what is your take on this?
So let me share a couple of experiences when I was a team member, and that is what translates to what I do today. Many years ago, when I started my career at Bain, one of the hallmarks of Bain in the US was direct feedback. And the feedback was, you're really bad at this effectively, that, here are things you need to do better. But it went beyond that. It also was, here's what you can do differently. So one feedback I got from one of my managers after a client meeting was, Anish, you're too quiet. You know a lot of things, but you don't say as much. So why don't you stand up and start using the whiteboard more often? Because as you do that, that will give you an ability to take control of the conversation, create a framework. You're very good at doing that. And that will allow you to add value rather than staying quiet. So that's something that has helped me a lot over the years. And that's something as we work with our teams, sometimes in taking care of them, you got to be able to help them succeed and be able to tell them about, here are things that you can improve. It's very difficult to do. It's something that people typically hesitate to say and people hesitate to hear. But that's essential for growth. And the second part was, again, an incident many years ago when I when I was sales and marketing leader for the .com and GE. We had gone to the CEO and said, you should shut this down because it's not going to go anywhere. And that evening, I called the chief commercial officer saying, look, we are shutting this down. I won't have a job here, but can I talk to you? I'd met him only once in a customer meeting, and that was for a very brief 5 minutes or so. But his response was quite startling. He says, Anish, I don't have time. I'm rushing to the airport right now. I'm back on Tuesday. We'll meet then, but don't call anyone else. You've got a job here. We'll figure out what that is when we talk on Tuesday. So I met him on Tuesday and I asked him, I said, you don't know me. How could you say this? He said, well, what I've heard is you help others quite a lot in the organization. And that is the kind of person we want here. And that's what I learned for the team, which is help them succeed, but help them help others as well. And that often is difficult in a red ocean, where you've got lots of sharks out there and you're trying to compete with each other and eat other sharks up. But that is essential for a team. That's essential for an organization. So one of the things I've done over the years, as we look at KRAs in an organization, I've always had 20% of the KRA on help others succeed. And every year we have a conversation on that, because everyone asks, what does this mean? And that conversation itself starts getting people to think about, how do I help my coworkers succeed? So these are the things I would look at as, in a sense, taking care of the team. That helps create a much stronger team.
Yes, thank you. Anand, are you ready with the story?
I will pass the story at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Then here, from what I have seen as a third party, what they do at search has passed on into, because I know Dr. Bhojraj very well, and that's actually how I got to know Anand. And only very recently I came to know that another school friend of ours, Rupali, Kevin's wife, she also knows Anand very well. That they have this set system, like he said, the Shrama Yoga and all that. And they in turn do a lot of this with every doctor team who comes in. So very subconsciously, I think they get whatever they are going through, they make the same culture passed on, at least at an experiential level, to the team who comes in there. So probably the blending becomes easier. And even if the tribals are feeling a little distanced, or the culture mismatch is so different from people who are coming in from cities, other fellows who are looking at Bhojraj sir only as a icon in spine surgery, it brings everybody together at the same connect and at the same level. So I think sharing an experience probably is one of your trump cards, I would say, if I could use that word. Because probably that works across no matter who joins the work.
Okay, a quick question to Anish before I hand over to Rujuta for summarizing and vote of thanks. We discussed that Mumbai is a place of red ocean, and Anand says that it's like Gadhchiroli is a blue ocean. So basically, in a red ocean, everyone is competing. So how do you create an attitude of collaboration from the mindset of competing? So how do you train your staff to collaborate with each other instead of competing with each other?
I think that's what a team is really about. And one sport that I grew to love, which is a very difficult one to explain, is American football. And that's where you really need to work as a team. There is no single person that can make a difference. It has to work as a team. So what we really do here across our teams is, one, emphasize what behaviors we are seeking across everyone. And for us, it is behaviors around values or ethics, collaboration, agility, and boldness. So collaboration is one of the key values we look for. Our leaders and our teams know that if you don't collaborate, you're not going to get ahead in the organization. So it is not about individuals getting ahead. It's about helping others succeed. That's where my earlier story around the 20% care and helping others succeed starts creating that pull in the organization for people to say, I need to help someone else succeed. If I do that, I will get ahead. It's difficult to do because the general tendency is to say, I'm going to get promoted and the other person's not, or vice versa. And to some extent, yes, that's true in an organization. That does tend to happen. But how do you create an environment where people feel more safe and secure, where they feel that there is room for promotion for a lot more people because the organization is growing and it's going to do well in multiple areas. And therefore, if you help others and can create that set of values, then you're going to be valued as a leader. It comes back to the culture you create. And therefore, the most important thing we look for in people that we hire is cultural fit. It doesn't matter how brilliant they are. It doesn't matter how good they are. If the cultural fit is not there, they don't belong there. So that is a very important filter to have when you get new people in, and very important to then live this every day so that people realize this is a culture we are in. And what I found is that's what attracts me to this culture. That's why I came to the Mahindra Group. I, in fact, spent literally 2 years talking with Anand before I came aboard because I hadn't seen the culture close up and I wanted to make sure it was the right culture that I was getting into. So I think that's the one that's most important.
Thank you. Over to you, Rujita.
Yeah, I think this webinar particularly has been very, very enriching. We have had a wonderful 1.5 hours, and I was just looking at the time and I said, oh my God, we've already come to the end. But lot of valuable inputs. I think finding your calling from there to really living your purpose. Both the leaders have, I think, highlighted one very important thing, that is purpose today. The other things which really came out from both the anecdotes and Anish's talk was that you will have challenges. You will always have challenges. But if the core of integrity and your values and probably authenticity and honesty and communication is always maintained, then that itself gives you strength to go ahead and charge through and probably continue to achieve what you have to. And what really struck me most from everything that Anand has said and his stories is that things don't come easy. Everything has to have, it was of course very simply put to us, but everything has to have a lot of determination and lot of desire to really improve upon what exists and to accept the problems as they are, and rather than complain about them, to focus on what solutions you can come up with, and with in your own unique way, in something which actually is what the people over there need. So I think blending these two is what really changes everything, and we've all seen the result that it already has produced. So on behalf of POSI, which is Pediatric Orthopaedic Society of India, on behalf of IOA, Indian Orthopaedic Association, and the Indian Academy of Cerebral Palsy, I don't think I can thank both of you all enough. I am thankful to Dhiren Bhai for involving me in these leadership webinars, because I have personally gained a lot of insight, regained a long lost friend, and found a new one as well. And I hope that we can continue this collaboration in future. At POSI, we are really trying to change a lot of the way people think about pediatric orthopedic health. And one of the projects we are at the moment already on is for a DDH care pathway. DDH is developmental dysplasia of the hip. And we probably want to try and get this into the public health at a future point. So I hope both of you all will be there to support us and guide us through that journey as well. And last but not the least, a strong silent supporter, OrthoTV, Counsel, who has been really listening and managing all the technicalities and questions and all. And hope we are going to have a rerun of this recording, which we can pass on to anybody who's interested.
Yeah, if I may just interject for one quick comment. Anand, you're doing a remarkable job and you're really a role model for many. So hats off to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind words. Same for you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can stop recording and then we can have some chit chat.
Sure.